Cause you feel my mind, or you feel my mind. We could build a dream, start up something new. And the world is on your shoulders, and you feel like falling over. Just let me in your head, so I can be there for you, there for you. The night is young, won't you sing for me? Won't you sing for me? You will fall asleep.
All right, we got a great show here, which is one of our top shows in my mind and everything like that, the VC Masters. And we've got Salman Azhar with us, and all along those lines, he's a professor at Duke University and also runs something called the Azimuth Opportunity Fund. And of course, he has got all those fine students over there at Duke University that he is developing in their minds. I'm a big fan of college professors. My dad was a college professor at both UNC, and I think he did some courses at Duke as well. But he's an investor with 200 plus investments over 20 plus years, an entrepreneur, and he loves solving challenging problems by unifying analytical and emotional aspects, utilizing what he learned from his super coaches. So I can't wait to hear what these super coaches are all about and all along those lines. I'm thinking a super coach might be somebody like Coach K or somebody like that, but I know you're talking about it, the business aspect and all along those lines.
Well, if I wanted to play basketball, Coach K would be the first one I would go to for coaching. But unfortunately, with my height and my athletic ability, I don't think basketball career is kind of on the cards at any time. But I started off as an amateur investor back in the early 2000s, and really lots of money. And that's basically when I realized that this is not for me. Until somebody talked to me and he said, well, the reason that you are not having success is because you're doing it wrong. And they kind of, in order to kind of communicate that point, they made a very good point. You know, even if you have the talent, unless you really have the right coaches and right people to learn from, you really can't get anywhere. And that's really the summary of like my investment career. And from there on, really almost everything that I do is that I ask for help from the very best, and that really increases a huge chance of success. So in like around 2000 or so, turn of the century, I worked with Carly Fiorina, and she said something very interesting. She said, you know, I have the exact same strategy as Tiger Woods, and Tiger Woods was a big deal at that time as a golf player. When I entered the golf course, but it's the execution that matters. Right. And my execution is not quite like Tiger Woods. And the reason that he gets that execution is because of two reasons. One is that he has coaches, and second is willing to ask for help. And those two things, right, really stuck in my mind. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those are the super coaches, and that's basically, you know, what I've applied. And the most success I've had really is in my investment career. Everything else has been kind of a very supplementary, whether it is helping good causes with money or time, or, you know, having an impact on real people in real time.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to turn it back over to you in a little bit, because I know you got a lot of things you want to let folks know about what's going on in the VC world and everything like that. But yeah, I was seeing a couple of things. One is, I do a show on the network as well. It's called The Online Dinner Party. And I actually had a guest yesterday that you would have enjoyed. And all along those lines, he is actually a franchise coach. So he actually coaches people on how to make money in franchises and like being a franchisee and everything like that. So like if somebody wanted to get a KFC or one of those other major franchises, and a lot of the advice you give is the advice he was given, which is basically like make sure that you got a plan. Also make sure that you are not adverse risk and everything like that. Because if you were adverse risk, you probably don't stand a good chance of being a good franchisee and all along those lines. But it was definitely interesting hearing his conversation and all along those lines. And then the other thing that was fascinating, you mentioned golf, and my uncle who passed away not that long ago was a couple of years ago, was a major golf coach. He used to coach people, including Michael Jordan and others, in how to play the game of golf and everything like that. And I was actually thinking about him yesterday when I was watching I think it was a news story, or it might have been a commercial or something like that, but it showed somebody putting a basketball into a golf hole, because I think they had expanded the golf hole, of course, so the basketball could go in it and everything. But it was just interesting. It was either basketball or soccer, but it was definitely not your typical small golf ball and everything like that. So it was just interesting and bizarre watching that commercial, because it's kind of like, that's not going to fit, that's not going to fit, that's not going to fit. And then all of a sudden it went into the hole and everything because they had expanded the hole.
Well, that's interesting. I've never seen that. Where I've seen soccer players play basketball with their feet. So imagine like what they are really trying to do is score a hoop in basketball by really kicking and kind of landing in it. And it's really a fascinating game, much more challenging than basketball or soccer alone. So it's basically soccer rules, and the way to score a goal is by putting the ball through the basketball hoop. But lots of things to unpack there. So first of all, I'm going to come back to this. I have been a franchisee for 3 different franchises, major franchises. One is Precision Tune, then Midas, then Taco Bell. So 2 auto companies and 1 food company, and franchise is kind of like a whole different business. But what you said, interestingly, is like the plan thing. And in the startup world, where I've spent most of my time as an entrepreneur and an investor, the most important kind of rule that we have is what Michael Tyson actually said it best. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yep.
That's pretty much what startups and startup investing looks like. And it's really how you react to that and how you pivot. And pivot is a very formal word in our industry, is how you change your plans according to what the defense gives you. Again, kind of using the basketball analogy or soccer analogy, that you always go in with a plan, let's say, to score most of your points by 3-pointers, and all of a sudden, they start guarding you at the rim and not giving any 3-pointers. So you basically say, okay, the defense is giving me a layup, so all I need to do is like find an open person or drive for a layup, because they're not going to give me 3-pointers. You also mentioned like the whole idea of like sports coaching, and I feel that in my life, people who have played competitive sports have generally been superior at in the startup world, because they can perform under pressure and they can perform when everyone is watching. A lot of people cannot do that. So I used to play chess for my college and before that school. And what it really, one of the things that I had to get accustomed to is that people are going to come and look at my game while I'm playing it. And if that is not bad enough, they are going to actually look at my score sheet and analyze my games so that their players can compete better with me. And one of the reasons I never really became a master and, or even an expert, so my rating kind of went up near 2000, but never kind of crossed 2000, is because I never was able to put in the time to study other players' games and study my own mistakes with the rest of my life in education and industry and all that stuff, to really invest that time in chess. And anytime you're playing at a professional and competitive level, it basically becomes your full-time job if you really want to rise above that expert or master kind of level.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. And as you were saying that, I was actually thinking to myself about some people that I know that are in the startup world, and how at least one of them teamed up with athletes, and they have a apartment complex that is still active and everything. I actually lived there, don't live there now, but I lived there some time back and everything. But I was thinking about Tom Neiman. I don't know if you know Tom Neiman, but Tom Neiman teamed up with Grant Hill and Christian Leitner, and they are who run Blue Devil Ventures. And of course, Blue Devil Ventures runs West Village, which is an apartment complex. But he got them, when he was looking for business partners, he did what you said. He went and found 2 athletes that he knew were successful, because he probably thought that they would have some business acumen and everything. And of course, they also had money, because they were NBA players at the time that I think he got started with them, and all along those lines. But I was just thinking about that notion of athletes being good for the startup careers and everything like that. So that's one example. I know some others, including some people that are associated with Jordan and others that have done some athletic ventures. As a matter of fact, Fran I'm trying to think of Fran's last name. She was a WNBA player, but she does a lot of investment out in the West Coast and in the Texas area and all along those lines, including having an energy drink that she is very big on, and all along those lines. I think it's Fran Carver, if I remember her last name correctly.
Yeah. So business acumen is not quite what I've kind of found. There. I mean, it's a lot of athletes have that, but it's not the trait that is common. What is trait that is common is the mental toughness,
Right.
and especially bouncing back from setbacks. That's
Right.
basically what it is. Regarding business acumen, my brother and I taught a few. Actually, my brother did most of the teaching. I used to do a session or two with the NFL Players Association and NBA Players Association at Stanford. Actually, that's where kind of like this vest comes from. Is that there are a lot of athletes that once they retire, they blow away their money.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know how to invest, whether it is in their own ventures or in other ventures. And a lot of them have unsuccessful ventures, or sometimes people that just swindle them out of their money, with some pipe dream or something like that. I continuously get these emails of 35% guaranteed return. There's no such thing as a 35% guaranteed return. If there was something as 35% guaranteed return, almost everybody is going to be, piling their money into it.
Right.
And that just doesn't happen. It's almost like saying that, okay, why would I buy a T-bill that guarantees me, let's say, and I don't know what the current rate is, like 4% or whatever it is. I don't even care about that kind of, barely keeps up with inflation. Why would I do that if I can get 35% guaranteed return? And if that is real, then everybody is going to start chasing that. And there's going to be like an oversupply of buyers, which means that the sellers can actually decrease the rate. So a lot of people fall for these schemes, and it is really important not to do that. There are other policies as well. Happy to kind of talk about them more when it comes to investing and startups.
Yeah, what are some of those other fallacies? That might be something interesting that people would definitely be interested in, because I know a lot of people that are thinking that they want to get involved in this whole notion of venture capital and some of the other investment startup kind of opportunities, but I don't think that they know the fallacies that are out there. And that's part of what I was talking to Greg. That was the gentleman that was the franchisee coach and everything along those lines.
Yeah, so I think so in my kind of experience, the biggest issue that I've discovered is that people who are very good at something feel that their skills are easily transferable to something else.
Right.
So just looking at my own self, the reason I didn't do well in my initial stages in investing is that I was a very successful entrepreneur. Really owe a lot to kind of people who helped me, and God and everybody that really was involved in that. So it's not like something I did alone, but it got to my head. And I thought that just because I'm a good entrepreneur and I can create value and I can sell companies and make money off that, I would be a good investor. It's kind of like me thinking, just to give you kind of the analogy that, that I'm a good basketball player. Just because, I'm a good entrepreneur, I'm a good basketball player, and I can now start competing with LeBron James and Michael Jordan, and, depending on which generation you are from, whoever is the greatest player at that time. And that is the biggest pitfall and the biggest fallacy that is there. I still talk to people who feel that they can make better investment decisions than I can or a professional can. Mm-hmm. And I have very simple kind of message to them. Look, I'm not trying to talk you down or, not disrespect you, but let me just say that I wouldn't apply for your job. Yeah. And let's say if I do apply for your job, I wouldn't get an interview. Mm-hmm. And let's say there's that small percent of the chance that I would get an interview, I would not get hired. Right. And let's say, I bribe my way through it and I do get hired. Any company would fire me based on my performance because A, I don't have the skills. And secondly, I don't have the time because I have another life. and you have another life, and you are like, this front end developer, you're great at that, more power to you. Or you're like, a banker, great, excellent. Or you are a writer or a movie star or whatever. That doesn't mean that you can do something else very easily. So fundamentally, if you don't trust me and you don't trust my expertise and you don't feel that I would make you money, you shouldn't be investing with me, because you're going to be my problem child if you do end up investing with me, because I'll have to fire you, because you're the one that's going to be calling me up every day and say, where's my money? And like these investments, if it is a year-long investment, it's going to take a year. And sometimes it may be actually a good idea for us to extend that for a few months. Like recently, we extended one of our investment for about 6 months because we can double the value of that company before an IPO by extending it 6 months. Now, I cannot tell you why, because that's basically, a lot of this information is confidential, and we are striking up a new partnership and stuff like that hasn't been announced. So we are bound by NDA that we can't disclose it to you. And if you're going to come and chew my head off or bite my head off, I'll actually bite and then chew my head off, then I really don't want you to be in this game with me, because you're going to be that one person that takes up 80% of my time that would be better spent, actually creating value for you. So, that's basically what I feel kind of like what the challenge in these things is. And people, who believe that do well, and they are able to kind of get past that and past that initial ego challenge and say, okay, fine, this makes sense and makes sense for us to proceed. But people who can't throw away their money, and it, regardless of how good they are in everything else, they really suffer in these situations. So I also wanted to talk about how the IPO market is doing recently. So, if we've been following this show, what we really do is we basically monetize the value of companies before they IPO or before they even become household names. So, for example, the best time to make money in SpaceX is not now. It was doing some time earlier, a few years ago. And that's basically where we play. And our IPO market has been very interesting and very choppy during this time.
It's interesting you were saying that. You gotta love technology. Technology is wonderful and everything like that. But just this notion of having expertise and understanding the expertise that you have is something that I think a lot of people don't understand in a lot of businesses. I think I've told you this before, either when we've met in person or in some of these other shows that I've appeared on with you and everything. My mom ran one of the largest nonprofits in the country, and everything like that was actually the tobacco settlement money and everything like that. It was the Golden Leaf Foundation that she ran until she retired about a little bit more than 10 years ago, and all along those lines. But she would oftentimes tell me that a lot of times people don't understand, even in that world, the rules of engagement that they're playing with. They think that they got the money one time, that they're going to keep getting the money and everything like that. But that's not the case, because even in the nonprofit world and with trust funds, because that's what Golden Leaf is and everything like that, they want to wean you off of the money and everything like that. So that's part of what they do, is that they want you to have like a 3 to 5 year plan. Speaking of plans, like we were talking about earlier, so they want you to eventually not be dependent on their money.
Yeah, so the nonprofit world is very similar to the IPO, the investment world or pre-IPO investment world. So here, in both cases, you have to get money from people. In the nonprofit world, you have to create value by changing lives of people in some way. In for-profit, you have to do the same thing. The difference only comes when in for-profit world, the customers are paying you for these services, and nonprofit world, somebody else is paying you for those services. And the easiest way you can kill any company, for-profit, nonprofit, or whatever, is by giving them a lot of money at the same time. And if you dump money, they are going to find ways to spend it as opposed to conserve it. And when they don't get that money next year or next month or next quarter, that's going to be the death of them. What I keep on emphasizing to people in nonprofit is that even though you don't have to return this money in any way or return shares of this money, you are accountable for how you use this money.
Right.
And if you get a kind of like a whole windfall at one time, imagine that it's never going to come again, and spend your money like the same way that you're doing before, with the additional thing that you can take, let's say 20% of this money, and then try to do something creative. But at least keep the stores, because this money may never come again. Or do it like an endowment, where you are taking, let's say 4% or 5%, or you're taking whatever you that you invest that money, and you're taking whatever is the upside of that. So I have, for example, some investors that are nonprofits, and they get some dividends, they get sometimes payout, and my advice to them is that keep your principal safe, and then whatever else you get, that's basically what you invest in your company, whether it's for profit or whether it's nonprofit or for profit. The same rule really applies. If a startup gets like $35 million funding round, that doesn't mean that they should start spending that 35 million now. That means that 35 million is spread until they are ready for the next funding round, which means that they have to deliver a certain amount of value to their customers before they can get there.
Yeah. What are some of the things that people are surprised about in this modern day era of VCs and all along those ways? Because I know, like I said, when I was talking to the franchisee, he was bringing up this notion of even a lot of times people, I think, don't think that they need a coach when they're getting a franchise or if they're getting a VC. And I think that people like you and people like the gentleman I interviewed with the franchise are almost a necessity. But I think that some people are like, oh, I can handle it myself and everything like that. So I was wondering, is that one of the myths that everybody thinks that they are as good as anybody else is, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, so I think it is hubris in a lot of cases, and it is, we all know kind of like this Dunning-Kruger effect kind of thing, that where people always think that they're smarter than they really are, and the dumber they are, the smarter they think they are, or the difference between the smartness and dumbness is there because they are not perceptive enough. I have several things that I'm not very good at. I'm not very good at sales kind of stuff. I just can't do it, right? So if there are two ways I can do it. I can just be myself and just share. This is basically the opportunity, and then leave people at that. I'm not very good at athletic stuff. I'm not very good at writing. I can do math much easier than writing, and for me to kind of say, okay, I'm going to quit everything and become a novelist would be a really bad thing to do. I mean, I have a lot of things that I can share and write a book, but I can't just I just can't get over that writer's block because it doesn't flow naturally for me. And maybe with coaching, I can get some tips and stuff. On the other hand, my son basically just finished writing his first novel, and he's a great writer, and you look at his writing and you just get this absorbed thing, and he has this gravitational pull in it. And I actually didn't know how bad I was at writing until I started really going, sent him look, I wrote this, can you edit it? And he was very nice, but he did give me feedback, and I've said, wow, this sucks. This is really bad. So, I mean, at that point, people who know me kind of okay, yeah, I just calibrate their expectations. Look, I'm not a good writer. Getting coaching for it may help. There are 10,000 other things for me to do. If I have, maybe later on in life, maybe I would get there. You mentioned franchise, by the way. Franchise is a very different concept from the other businesses because you are actually taking an existing operating system and you are implementing it. And that makes it an execution game. And execution is actually one of the things that is not regarded as important, but it is really important. Because, in fact, I quoted Carly Fiorina that, execution basically sets her apart from Tiger Woods. There's also a book by Larry Bossidy, I think, that about execution, the art of getting things done, which basically makes a case that people, glorify strategy, but they don't glorify execution. And if you really look at your life, at least if I look at my life, I have lots of strategies that I haven't executed because, in fact, I would say about half the things that I have thought of, I mean, maybe even more if I just get back to flashing ideas, like 90% of the things I think of, I don't execute. Maybe for good reason. Maybe they're not executable, but I like a lot of times I don't even like get to the point where I have time to execute these.
You brought up something that was interesting as well and everything. You mentioned when you did franchises that you had one that was a food franchise and two that were in a different industry altogether and everything like that. So even in the VC world, how important is it to find a niche market or something like that? Because it sounds to me, and even when you mentioned it, because I know that I think two of them might have been electronics or something like that, and the other one was definitely in the food space, but they weren't in the same industry. But you have some people that I know want to stay in the same industry, whether they're doing VC work or whether they're doing franchise work. So how important do you find it to be in industries that you're comfortable with?
So there are two questions there. The one is about importance and the other is about practicality. So in the franchise world, it is very easy to be in different industries because you are really implementing somebody else's operating system. And all you need to do is really follow that operating system religiously. And in fact, the job of a franchise business coach is to educate you about that system and operate it. So, think about our operating system as like a computer operating system, like Windows or Mac. Right? If you are operating a Windows, you're not writing any of the code of the operating system. You're operating the Windows operating system, and you need to learn how to operate it. Now, if you switch to Mac, it's a different operating system, and you have to learn to operate it, but you don't, again, have to get into the weeds. When you get into the investment or entrepreneurial world, it becomes a very different game when you go from one company to another company, and they are in two different sectors or verticals, as we call them. So a lot of people choose to stick with the same vertical. The danger of that is that if that vertical is hit in any way, you can lose a lot of money right away. And you don't have that diversification, which is like an important principle. So what I look for is certain common thread in these companies, and that common thread I find is technology, which basically I have experience with, and then I would pair with a domain expert in that area and trust some of their judgment in that domain expertise. And one of the skills that entrepreneurs and investors also have learned is that they can pick things very quickly. In fact, my PhD didn't help me in any other way except being able to take an uncharted territory and learn it and develop a certain amount of expertise. And when you do that, you actually come up with more creative ideas than somebody who spent a lifetime in that. For example, one of the startups I did was in customer experience. And in customer experience, basically, different aspects. Let's say if you look at automotive customer experience versus food customer experience, since there are two things we are talking about, that's, it's the same kind of thing that you have at fundamental level, but then you have the domain expertise that comes with it. So for example, in the fast food industry, I found out that 70% of the sales of a particular fast food restaurant is through the drive-through. So what that means is now I can apply all my technology and optimization skills to maximize the throughput from the drive-through. Because if I can push 10 other cars through the drive-through, I can get more sales than if I try to push things within the restaurant, because speed is not going to be important once people kind of get out of the car and get into the restaurant. So it is maximizing the throughput, which is same concept as network management. So it becomes a very similar situation, but I do need that domain expert to tell me where the problems are to be solved so I can solve them.
Yeah, that makes sense. As we get to wrap up, because I know we're wrapping up and everything, this has been a fascinating conversation. I know you weren't sure where we'd be going, but I thought that we'd go talk about what I had learned recently myself, and I think it's been a good learning experience. But I do have to tease our founders and everything like that, and this will be my last question for you and everything. You talked about diversification and everything like that, and I know usually it's you and Nick on this show and everything. So does this mean that in addition to running this lovely TV station that both you and I are part of with Nick and Kim, that they need to get into the bookstore business and some of the other businesses as well and everything like that? Because that would be an example of diversification, possibly.
Yeah, no, so you can't do that. In fact, I had this guy that had put on his LinkedIn that I'm running 200 startups at the same time. I'm like, you're lying. Either you are like, so you can't do that, but you can diversify when it comes to investment. You can invest in different things. So I strongly suggest, like, if you are running, an XYZ thing, then invest in ABC and D and F and diversify that way. And for investment diversification, it's much easier if you are operating a business yourself. Diversification is much harder, which is one of the reasons that I went from entrepreneurship to investor. The other reason I went is that the financial crisis made the valuation so cheap that it made sense to be an investor and pick up cheap value, as opposed to be an entrepreneur where you give a lot of shares for something that, very little money.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. Like I said, I had fun with the one yesterday with the franchisee coach, and I've definitely learned a lot from you as well on this one. So we're going to get on out of here, because I think you usually run about a 30-minute show, if I remember correctly, and all along those lines and everything like that. But I know next week he'll be back, and hopefully Nick will be out of the air, because when I got the text this morning, it's like, I'm in the air, and therefore you've got to do it and everything like that. So I think that we did a great job.
It was great seeing you. Take care, Mark.
All right. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I go anywhere with you, 'cause you fill my mind, or you fill my mind. We could build a dream, start up something new, and the world is on your shoulders, and you feel like falling over. Just let me in your